Hello and welcome to At the 55, your home for OUA football. Me and Tom are back on the mics to break down the opening weekend of football in the OUA. And my, oh my, what an opening weekend it was. We're going to get into all the games, give you our players of the week, OD, and special teams as we do. But not before I say, Tom, my friend, how the heck are you doing?
Oh man, I'm always doing well, but when you have a week like this where every single game was enjoyable to watch, I'm on cloud nine. This was fantastic. What a weekend of football.
Yeah, it was so good. Tom, we got to see two of those games starting in Guelph, the first game of the season versus Carleton, and then down at Mac. And, we'll certainly touch on some of these things additionally when we get into those games. But I just want to say how, like, from the bottom of my heart, genuinely amazing it was getting to connect with so many folks who specifically heard us say we were going to be those games. And then we're like, you know what? I had to check out the YouTube feed so I knew what you bozos looked like so I could find y'all. And just, again, and for those of you who even said, I don't always agree with what you say. And I wouldn't have it any other way.
Absolutely.
That's not what we're here to do. We're here to just call it like we see it and bring some entertainment and shed a heck of a lot of needed light on this league. And again, if you needed any more of a testament to how good the product on the field is, and really just to validate our mission of make the off the field product and things that surround the game match it, this is the weekend to do it. We'll get into all those games, but let's start off with our metaphorical hardware to hand out. Starting with offensive player of the week. Tom, there were some really good offensive performances. We'll get into some of the stars who shined in each of these games. But I think you hit it right on the nose when we were talking about who we want to highlight for this award today.
Yeah, my goodness. If you had asked me before this week, if we were looking at all the games, who I thought might win Offensive Player of the Week, it certainly would not be who we are picking. First year quarterback in his first ever game for the U of T Blues, Caleb O'Donohue gets the Offensive Player of the Week this week. He finishes 19 for 28, 268 yards, 2 touchdowns in the air, and then one on the ground. This kid was electric against a very good Waterloo defense that was just constantly sending pressure at this guy. He seemed calm, cool, collected. I did not know. It did not seem like we were watching a first year kid out there.
Yeah, no, spot on. I mean, we're going to go through the games in chronological order. So this will be the last one we talk about. And in so many ways, we're saving the best for last because this was so entertaining. Tom, I was texting with you because I wasn't getting to watch this one live. I was actually at a doubleheader softball game. And number one, I feel especially old today because my body hurts like I just played in that game yesterday. I'm talking about the UofT Waterloo one, not a doubleheader men's softball league game. But I also feel that much older because when our guy Adam McGuire is talking about this kid as a true redshirt freshman starting, I'm thinking to myself, Tom, you and me are just starting high school when this kid's born. Roughly in
Oh,
that ballpark, and to see him doing his thing, though it was a gorgeous thing. I cannot wait to talk about that game. Shout out to Coach Da, shout out to Coach Canisius.
yeah,
Tommy,
hell yeah.
what a game you dialed up. Holy heck, I'm so fired up. That was awesome. Of course, we're going to highlight some of the other performances that came on the offensive side of the ball in these other games, and in that one too, another great quarterback in that game as well. Move to the defensive side of the ball. And Tom, this was a game that, again, we were kind of watching in between our journey from Guelph to Hamilton, that, of course, being the Queens Windsor game. And, it's got to be defensive back Robert Springer with the 3 interceptions, a couple stellar batted balls, plays in the end zone. And we'll get into all the narrative with this when we get into that game breakdown. But the whole time, I'm thinking to myself, Queens goes to Windsor last year. There's no Vreeken, and that Windsor defense, it's one of the best in the country, just really just came to eat, and they just dominated them, held them to 5 points in 2023. And we're thinking, okay, Vreeken's back there. They got Kasari back, a few missing pieces, and Windsor, even losing a guy like Mufta, even losing a guy like Maceo Christmas is still like, yeah, guess what? You might score a few more points, but we're still going to shut you down. And, we'll talk about some of those other guys on the defense. But I mean, what an outing by Springer, what an outing for that defense.
Oh my gosh. That Windsor defense, we walked in there thinking, oh my goodness, missing Maseo Christmas, missing Mufta Ageli. There's going to be some holes there. There's going to be some issues, but they came out just as strong. And you're looking at guys going like, oh, you got to watch out for Claudia Moosen. You got to watch out for Devin Verasuk. And then you have Robert Springer, don't sleep on me, with 3 interceptions on Alex Vreekin. So what an outing for that Windsor defense as a whole.
Most certainly. And we'll cap it off with special teams. Tom, we were debating over who gets the honor of this one. And, whose guy is it? He's our guy. And I'll just stick with the back and forth format here. We're kind of taking liberties as far as not an individual in this case. Tom, special teams player of the week coming off of week 1.
Well, I'll call out one of the big plays. You get to finish it off with your guy in here, but it's
genius.
Going to the entire Windsor punt return team.
Windsor?
Sorry, Western. I'm still high on Windsor. Western punt return team. 2 block punts, including one by Ryan Barthelson, which ends up being recovered by Ben Cottrell and ending up for the first touchdown of that Western game. Absolute huge shout out to them and your guy. Take it away.
Well, getting that special teams unit getting dialed up by our guy, Adam Grandy. One of my coaches when I was at Guelph, you got to coach with him with the Burlington Stampeders. He's been at Western for a few years now, and also coaching up linebackers there. And, again, that's maybe one of the best linebacking cores in Ontario. Without thinking too much about it, it probably is the best linebacking core in Ontario. Shout out to the Grandy man. So happy to see what he's doing. So happy to see, all these teams finally get their rosters and coaches pages uploaded. And I'm not only getting to stare at Mr. Adam Grandy's beautiful mug here, but right next to him, Dennis McPhee is the D-line coach. So, hey, as a quick, to all the OUA folks out here listening, and we know a lot of you are, hey, come on, let's get these roster pages updated a little earlier. I'm sure, and Western, we got some stuff to say about your roster page, especially in terms of an individual, a player who popped up in this game that just, we were both apoplectic seeing him on the field for good reasons. But come on, let's get those rosters updated. Let's get back to the days of 55-man rosters, at the 55-man rosters being published to the public, or maybe just drop us a line so we can do our job that much better, not for our own sake, but for the people. Tom, we're all we're for the people.
Absolutely. I mean, we had somebody come up to us and say, you guys got to get some kind of insider info in terms of who's coming back, roster changes and things. We go, we're just in the same page as everybody else is. We try to reach out to some folks. They give us the runaround. So we really rely on those roster updates.
Shout out to you, Jeff Cooling. Well, those are our awards. Let's dive into the action, and we'll start with the game that kicked it all off from the Royal City. Final score in this game, the Carleton Ravens 25, our Guelph Griffins 38. Tom, this was a game that had a lot of interesting beats in terms of who was on the field, in terms of a couple injury things that are not knowing the full status of, heartbreaking to think of what the worst case potential is, but also so impressive from the standpoint of early on this game. It's a little bit slow. It's 7-0 for Carleton coming out of the first. It's a bit slow in the second as well. And we're thinking, you know what? We called this as a shootout, but what were we thinking, right? I mean, first game of the OUA season, even teams or of any football season, those offenses take a little bit more time. Maybe you're not as far in the playbook. No, these teams came to play. And frankly, the difference of 13 points is perhaps a little friendly on the Carleton side of things, because we'll get into all the machinations of the things that either happened or didn't happen or things that got called back. But this was a Guelph team that was looking so sharp. And once they got rolling, it just really didn't feel like Carleton had a response or had that second punch once they took Guelph's haymaker.
Yeah, when you watch this game, just like you said, Guelph took a little bit of time to get rolling, but once they found their offense and once they found their capabilities, they were humming along. Especially in a certain point in this game, it felt as though the Carleton advantages were really brought on by some Guelph mistakes, a fumble, an interception, and things of that nature. But credit to the Carleton Ravens, obviously. They took advantage of those mistakes, but Guelph was just really impressive in this opening showcase here. I especially love the run game. Obviously, we didn't see Isaiah Smith out there. We're
Mm.
told that he was a healthy scratch. Should see him later on this season. However, Donovan Malloy picked up right where he left off. 17 attempts, 137 yards. He was pounding the ball like crazy. And I just love to see that Griffin run game anchored by a solid offensive line.
Solid's underselling it. Like that O line was so spectacular. Tom, I need to give you all the flowers in the world for calling out. I believe I'm going to scroll through here super quickly. What turned out to be Ife Onyeka's, I'm thinking, only sack he had on the game. In fact, I don't even think they're showing it on here. I don't know what's going on with that. They're not showing a sack for him. They're showing 3 tackles for loss. Onyeka's still a beast, but Tom literally, I forget who it was on the O-line that went down for a play or two, and you're like, all right, Onyeka's about to eat, and he absolutely did. But other than that, this was a team that was single covering Onyeka with their tackles and just being able to give the quarterback so much time in that effort. You're really familiar with this offensive line. A lot of those guys that were still there is a beautiful thing, seeing them all come up, give you your adulations. I'm forgetting who was specifically saying he wouldn't have been at Guelph had it not been for you. You heard me, Mac fans. This is a club that I think we need to take another little beat there, that like on an offensive line perspective, we talked about the impact of our guy, Coach McDonald, returning, but they got the bodies in there that when you add those things together, again, the high scoring nature of this game that we thought it would be came true. I think some of our predictions about this Guelph run game, and this offense on the whole for the season, I think look like it might pan out as well.
Absolutely. And who would we be, especially as former offensive linemen, if we didn't call out those guys? So I'm going off of memory here, so forgive me, but right tackle, Daniel Hosevar, right guard, Spencer Masterson, center, Ethan Pyle. I believe the left guard was Mitchell Schretzinger, and left tackle, my guy, Tommy Barakis. He was the dude that I helped bring to Guelph, and he won Herd Player of the Game. It brought so much pride to me to see that dude really ball out and kind of do his thing. But yeah, that O-line under Coach Mike McDonald, for anybody else who listens to us, they may think, what are you guys doing highlighting an offensive line coach? He's the real deal. When he is out on the field coaching for these Guelph Griffins, they are better as a whole because that O-line is performing at a very high level. I loved everything that I saw out of this offense.
Absolutely. And of course, it was more than just the run game. Guelph seemingly went back to the 2 quarterback set with Aboud and McCray. And for a stretch where it looked like it wasn't just a little back and forth, McCray was really putting together a couple series where, he ends up on the scoreboard, on the score sheet, 3 for 5 in the air for 65 yards and a touchdown. Of course, what he can add on the ground is so dynamic again, where he gets 82 yards on the ground and a touchdown. For those who forget, I think it was 9 touchdowns he got on the ground last year. And I think what really encapsulates what's so exciting about this team is that you go through who was catching those balls from Aboud and from McCray, and we see Jacob Thomas, 4 receptions, Willem Arsenault, 2 receptions, a touchdown, Kane Stevenson, so great to see him do his thing, and a touchdown, Ryan Ogilvie with 1, Donovan Malloy, Jackson Zerby with 1. You're not seeing Janusis on this list, right? And he was out there in the game and he's doing his thing. He's blocking. He's doing all the things that, again, speak to, they got my guy Alex Charette back there coaching up, and Charette was a great receiver, great H-back, and would put his nose into the mix when the time was called. And again, I think speaks to, one, when your top receiver, I think it's fair to say Janusis is the top skilled player in that receiving core, isn't getting his touches. And maybe that's a product of Carleton saying, here's where we need to focus, and then Guelph responding as saying, here's who's then going to respond. But then just that positive environment that where, again, it's not seemingly to cause any strife, is a beautiful thing.
100%. And really, before I dive into the passing game, you highlighted it beautifully. I really want to shout out Marshall McCray here, because we saw that Griffin offense finally kind of get things going, probably first end of the first quarter, second quarter kind of thing. And the majority of the reason was because of Marshall McRae. He was either handing the ball off to Donovan Malloy, but what really got Carleton off their backs is when McRae kept it and he'd take off and run. His longest of the day was 21 yards. But now suddenly you really have to stay balanced. You have to stay at home because if you start favoring either way, if you start really trying to load up against the run or anything else, you've got McRae, who was just as fast and just as elusive as anybody else out there. And he was really able to do his thing. So certainly shout out to him. But yeah, I love to see how much they were spreading the ball out and around. You mentioned before, Janusis didn't really have a catch. He did have a pretty unfortunate fumble at the very end that led to a Carleton Raven touchdown, but for the most part, wasn't really a part of the game plan. But the thing that I really loved is that, like you said, Janusis on his best day is one of the best receivers out there. I really think so. And so he's already pulling away some Carleton defenders because they have to just respect him at the bare minimum. If you put him in single coverage, chances are he's going to be able to come down with the ball. So suddenly you have to have an eye on him. Even if you're not directly double covering, you have an eye, and that leaves room for guys like Jacob Thomas or William Arsenault to really go out there and do their thing. And we saw Tristan Aboud, he goes 18 for 16, 150 yards, one touchdown, one pick. Not the greatest day, but what I really loved is the reads that he was making. A lot of the passes that he was making that even though they missed, they were on target. They were just there. There was one to William Arsenault that was just off by the tips of his fingers. So chemistry needs to get there a little bit more. Maybe he needs to get a little bit more used to live bullets. But man, if they can get that pass game going as well as this run game, Guelph is going to be scary.
And this is a Carleton pass defense that I think we thought very highly of, and rightfully so. But again, as far as things that we didn't know when we previewed both week one and Carleton in general, it turns out no Louis Laveau returning. Star cornerback for them. I didn't see, I'm just realizing this now, I don't think I saw Alameen Shiplou out there, another cornerback who's been good for them over the years. We did see Patrick Lavoie back at left tackle, and that's obviously going to be huge for them. And like, let's transition to the Carleton side of things, because, you know, like we definitely saw some positive things, and we haven't really got to arguably the most monumental aspect of this game that we're kind of left on read about, which was Tristan Lefebvre going down. I think it was in the midst of the ball that ended up getting picked off and returned for 6 by Johnny Green. He doesn't return. In the process, we see second-year quarterback, first time, I don't know if it was the first time getting reps, but second-year quarterback Elijah Barnes, the lefty coming in from the Ottawa region, who goes 11 for 21, 178, one touchdown, one interception, gets a, respectable 23 yards on the ground as well. And that's really where, again, I mean, we talked about Carleton being a team where they're a top 3 passing offense at their best. And, give credit to a guy in Matthew Morin picking up 114 yards on the ground. I mean, at the start of this game, he had a couple big carries, and we're thinking, golly, Guelph, you got Curtis Woodmansey back there. You got Josh Campbell. You got Brent. You got McDougal. You got all these guys. You got Tuzo back. Everyone. And man, oh man. But so a couple names in the secondary that didn't come back. A run game that looked frisky at times, but really it's just like, we need to talk about this. We see Lefebvre go down, Barnes come in, and as nice as it was to see this young kid have some really nice plays, the touchdown coming off the back of, you mentioned Aboud having the interception. Sorry, Tom, if it's not a guy like Louis Laveau on the secondary getting interceptions, or Shiplou, or some of these other guys out there, Ottman Brom, who got the interception for Carleton? Chris Tupin? Was it Tupin?
The most natural ball hawk that the Carleton Ravens have ever seen. Michael Lightbody coming down with the big man interception. The best play of the whole damn game.
No, that was stellar. But again, as much fun as that was for us, no doubt for the sideline, that obviously fired them up. And yeah, he threw an absolute seed. To, I think it was Hatchie or Ray. They're the two with the receiving touchdowns for Carleton on the day. Like, man, we don't know the status right now for Lefebvre. It looked like maybe an upper body injury. Spoiler alert, your shoulder kind of matters a lot for a quarterback if that's what it is, and that's purely speculation. Um, man, that blows, man.
Yeah, that's a big loss if that is what ends up happening with Tristan Lefebvre being out. Obviously, we really think of him as a top tier quarterback in the OUA, but then you see Elijah Barnes go out there, and he's a second year player. But like you said, I think this is the first time he's had some really significant action, especially in a game at the time that was still relatively close, and they were still trying to go back out of it. He finishes with 11 for 21, 178 yards, one touchdown, one pick, and like some of the throws that he was making, you and I are looking at each other going, oh, damn, that was pretty impressive. I reached out to former quarterback coach Andreas Dueck and asked him a little bit about
Dewey.
Elijah Barnes, and he just said, yeah, dude's a baller. Dewey knew him from some camps that he did previously in Hamilton and also obviously coaching him at Carleton. But he said he's going to be a real threat in this Carleton Raven team. He's going to take a little bit of time. Obviously, like you said, he's just a second year player, still needs to get himself accustomed. But anybody who's got the Dewey stamp of approval, I know is going to be a stud. So I was really impressed with Elijah Barnes. We have to call out Kasim Ferdinand. I
Please.
mean, that dude was catching balls he had no right in catching at certain times. He finishes with 5 catches for 75 yards. Ben Huckabee, 5 catches for 70 yards. Frederick Hatchie and Tristan Reddy both with touchdowns on the day. This passing offense has the potential to be just as good as it was previously. I liked what we saw from Matthew Morin, like we said. I still think that Elijah Barnes has some potential. Obviously, he's a second-year player. I like what I saw at the bare minimum. But the big thing that I want to make sure I'm calling out here, and once again, just to dive just as quickly back into the Griffin side before we continue on, is in the first half, you and I were looking at each other going, hey, this guy Matthew Morin is running all over Guelph. I'm pretty concerned about this run defense. Second half adjustments come out and shut the door pretty easily. Not easily, I shouldn't say that, but pretty handily. They did a really great job. And I tweeted something out earlier, and it's something that applies here as well. In my opinion, one of the most common things that can really define a great team, a championship caliber team, is how well you adjust at halftime. What kind of adjustments do you make? How well can you handle what you've been seeing? How can you conform to whatever is going to be working here? And I think Guelph did exactly that with a tight game that really got blown open in the back half.
I mean, how many years have we been talking about that with what Paul Gleason's defenses for what am I saying? Calling him Paul Gleason. Coach Gleason's defenses for Western's always done, and no better example than the game we'll talk about when they went to Ottawa to take on the GGs. No, you're totally right. It was a really good performance by that defense from the whole. We talked about Johnny Green getting the interception. Anthony Mortuzo with an interception kind of shut the door. There was like a really tense moment that came up late where it was like it looked like everything was all signed, sealed, delivered for the win, and then you could kind of feel that murmur kind of come over the crowd of oh my God, wait, if they score here, there's a lot of time. They have how many timeouts they have? Tuzo picks it off in the end zone, officially signed, sealed, and delivered. And I made a face for those just listening, Tom, when you saying how effective this passing game can be. And I don't mean to undersell what Elijah Barnes can be. Shoot, just the fact that he's a lefty, I was so sold on him and our guy O'Donohue, the two southpaw slingers. It's just that we know what Lefebvre can do. It's a O line that is I don't know across the board. We talked about Lavoie, but just from my memory of going into last year of saying, you know what, it's a young O line, but they can gel together. And obviously, as we saw, they were running the ball, at least in the first half, better than we've seen them do in a few years, going back to Nathan Carter and those really great Josh Ferguson years. And so it just feels again, not knowing the status of the Fev, that it's just man, you have so many good pieces here, that this offense could be something that's really special. But again, who knows? We didn't think we were going to get the types of things we saw to Aboud and McRae as first-year stars. Shoot, obviously, we already talked about what a guy like Caleb O'Donohue was doing in his first start. So it's just from that standpoint of everything you said is true, and it lined up for this offense to be really special with a guy in there who we've seen do it. And now we're just looking at a team in Carleton who, loses a game on the road, and then they have to take on Windsor at home next week, Western after that. It's just, man, oh man. Even if they had won the game, but they have a healthy Lefebvre, you feel just like obviously that much more confident about it. Tom, any last things on this game you wanted to highlight as far as being at the game? I mean, it was a great affair getting to be on the roof of the pavilion and things like that. There was a few things I think we were a bit less than joyous about in terms of the experience. Do you want to touch on that at all? Any other things on the game?
I mean, we were hoping to see a little bit more from the crowd, certainly. I was hoping that the first years were already going to be moved in and they were going to be out at the game. I don't know if that wasn't the case or if they were moving in later or whatever the case may be. It was still a decent sized crowd. Some of the in-game entertainment wasn't quite there as of yet. Maybe that once again goes back to, the students aren't in there yet. The cheerleaders weren't there yet, whatever. So certainly that's going to be better. But the thing that I really want to call out, and I think is a really great picture of what we've been talking about in the offseason about the culture change and the vibe change, you saw Guelph win, and the players are celebrating, but they all immediately run to Coach Soria. They don't run out onto the field to celebrate with each other. They run to Coach Soria, so that they can hold him down to get him a Gatorade bath. But you just see them all rally behind this guy and be so excited. The culture is different here. The players love these coaches. They're getting the best out of them. I'm really, really high on this Griffin squad. I'm really excited to see what they can do later on into the season as well.
A Coach Soria who's out there in a Griffin polo and like cargo shorts, just like,
hell yeah,
I'm just calm, cool, collected. Wear what you like, have a Griffin emblem on it, do us some good, have that red, gold, and black. Otherwise, what makes you comfortable makes you successful, which again speaks to a change in eras with this club. And you know what? I don't want to be too harsh on the those football related things. I think a big part of it is just we're watching these other games. We're literally in Mac couple hours later, and the students had moved in. They had the cheerleaders. They had I don't know if they had the band out, but one of the other games we're watching, they have the band out and everything like that, and just felt like, come on now. Come on, like you and me, Tom, are out here doing our thing, promoting this thing. Like, golly, come on, not Guelph Griffin football team, like no. University of Guelph. This is out to you, U of G. This is a Guelph Griffin football hat, as far as I'm concerned. On my head, U of G, do a little bit better. Come on now, you get 4 home games in the regular season, and if you're lucky, maybe 1 or 2 more in the playoffs. Make each one count. Shall we move on to our next game?
Let's do it.
Well, from one alumni stadium to another, we head down to the end of the 401 under the shadow of the Golden Arches, where the home Windsor Lancers, just like they did a year ago, took out the Queen's Golden Gales at home. Final score in this one, Windsor 25, Queens 21. Tom, where do we start with this one? We kind of set it up already in that preview or in giving out Defensive Player of the Week to Robert Springer, where Vrican coming back for this team, Kasari coming back. We look at how Queens fared going into their house, Windsor's house last year, and just thinking, all right, hey, you know what? Things being a little different. We made the commentary a year ago or less than a year ago, whenever it was. This is going to be a different matchup. And of course, 25-21, that's a great ball game. That's a super tight ball game. What jumps out to you from that standpoint that, again, that this Windsor defense, this Coach Patrick Donovan defense, losing some of those massive dudes in the box, and massive both in terms of their impact and massive also because one of them is moved the heck out of my way. Kelly, wherever you are, I hope you're doing great things, my friend. Was still able to just look this offense in the eye and say, okay, Vrican, you saw what we did to Leo last year. You saw what we did to Weir. Let's see what you got now. To me, I think that's the starting point, just how effective that defense was, and still being like, I don't care who isn't here. The system is greater than the pieces, and we're just running it back.
There's a reason the saying goes, defense wins championships here. When that Windsor defense is really playing, they looked really impressive. I mean, Alex Vrican throws 4 interceptions in total on the day. And you and I both know that his ceiling is to be one of the elites in the OUA. So to do that to a potential elite OUA quarterback is really, really impressive. I loved the play from Devin Verasuk and from Ethan
Mm,
John. Verasuk having moved into the middle to replace Maseo Christmas, who had moved on. You would have thought that he had been playing that position the entire time. He finishes with 8 total tackles, flying over the field. And then Ethan John, 8 tackles, 1 sack, and 1 tackle for loss. They were flying all over the field. And the thing that I really is starting, not only starting, I think is a staple to that Windsor defense, is once they have arms around you, it's a tackle.
mm.
I saw rare,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
one broken tackle at all. Windsor has phenomenal tackling techniques. They do a really great job of, hey, you catch the ball, you run as far as you did because you got great blocking. That's great. As soon as I get my hands on you, you're going down. That's it. And that is such an amazing asset to have sure-handed tackling. Some of the biggest plays that we see on a consistent basis are broken tackles to go out there. So that's awesome for Windsor.
Oh, I love you brought that up because I think we were literally saying we're at your house, just like, waiting for the MAC game to start. We're checking out this game. And I think I was mentioning my favorite play. One of my favorite plays was like a 3-yard run from Kasari where he like broke one tackle, spun out of another, and then finally got taken down. And it was both so impressive on his part because, again, we'll go to the kid from Maine, 21 carries for 166 yards on the ground, and just like, I'm in total agreement with what you're saying, but like still one of the most impressive moments is him breaking 2 tackles on a play, because that's impressive against anyone. But as you highlighted, when you go against this Windsor defense, these guys know how to tackle, and they play with that blue collar, that gold swagger, shout the flip out to the Windsor social media crew, whoever put together that in mid, like when they cut to the commercial and they're play. Oh, I don't know if it's on YouTube. I don't know. Hey, to our guy Brett Hedges, first of all, shout out to you.
Yeah, always.
We need to figure out how to shout out again that video. I'm getting chills thinking about Tom. I literally told you I wanted to take a clip of that and send it to like some of the kids at my high school who do that type of stuff and be able to say, you got to kind of steal this to do something similar. If you don't know what we're talking about, I don't know where to direct you to other than to say tune into Windsor Lancer games, which you should be doing anyways because it's one of the best teams in the nation. But blue collar gold swagger is what this team is all about.
There is no better slogan for a team. Blue collar gold swagger. You and I were looking at each other like, oh, let's go. We were so fired up.
It was like they solved marketing. It was like, okay, we're done. There's no market. Hang up your hat. We're done. The Windsor Lancer social media crew. That was so cool. Oh my gosh. Tom, this game was, and thanks to that part of like a team in Queens that ran the ball a heck of a lot, with Kasar getting 21 attempts and getting a couple really nice carries for sure, though he doesn't end up with a touchdown. It's funny, no Anthony Souls, yet Kasari still can't get touchdowns on the ground. But this was, and so probably in part by like 2 teams that run the ball, that tackle, great defenses, some moments that got really chippy for a week 1 game, a moment where, our guy Salas Hubert was like ready to fight the whole Windsor sideline following a play where I can't remember who it was, gets pushed out late. And Silas is just like, okay, I'm about this action, and just you know what? I'm happy that like no one got kicked out or anything like that. Obviously, because we want to see these guys playing, but it like I guess I'll take this as a way to also talk about that Queens defense, where we talk about what Windsor did. Olivier Mwembe, obviously he leaves that linebacking core. But, Justin Pace really had a great game at linebacker, 4 tackles, 5.5 tackles, 4 solos, 1 tackle for loss. But really, like, you talk about Windsor hitting hard and like finishing on their tackles. Queens is right up there with them from that standpoint as well. And I think, again, what led to a really entertaining game from the standpoint of just how chippy it was, how physical these teams were. And, 25-21, I'd say in Canadian football lingo, that kind of bears out to what we kind of thought it was going to be of a beat 'em up affair, not the type of high scoring that we got in in Guelph. Carleton, though, you get nearly 50 points in the game scored. Both these teams obviously running the ball. Both these defenses secure tackles and secure tacklers and hitting hard. And a couple moments where I was like, man, oh man, do I hope that there's a rematch between these two teams somewhere down the line.
Most definitely. I mean, you start looking at and that Queens defense we know is damn good because they're always damn good. Anytime Coach McManus is at the helm, you got a really solid defense there. But for the most part, I was really impressed. Once again, the offensive lineman talking about offensive line, but the Windsor offensive line did a very good job of limiting a very good Queens defensive line to nothing really spectacular. Obviously, you mentioned Silas Hubert, Darian Newell. Those guys are going to be studs. They're going to make some plays. But like Silas finishes with only 2 total tackles. Darian Newell finishes with 1.5, 1 tackle for loss. So to really limit those guys is an automatic, you're doing something really well because that alone is pretty difficult. And I think that also goes into, some of the play calling that was happening too. I really liked what I saw from the Queens run game and that from that defense. I think they're still both really solid. Obviously, Kasari really kind of doing his thing. The defense looked pretty good. I also really loved some of the receivers for Queens. We were talking about it previously about, we really didn't see a whole bunch from them, whatever. I saw Nathan Falcone make a few great plays, Nico Cuomo, Matt Camillo. I liked what I saw from them. Obviously, Alex Vreekin really didn't have the best day himself. His total stat line, 14 for 28, 187 yards, 1 touchdown, 4 picks. But as a whole, I still think this Queens team is really solid. I just think this Windsor team is really freaking good. And anytime you have to travel to the Golden Arches, like we've talked about, that's a tough, tough game for anybody to go to.
Definitely. And, to pick up the conversation about that Queens offense, and of course, first game for Matt Nesbitt calling up plays as offense coordinator for Queens, returning to the last place where he was an offensive coordinator in Windsor, going back 5 years ago, roughly somewhere in that ballpark. And as we said, it's not a situation where, the old guy, the former guy, not old guy, but the former guy in Flaxman, it's like, your stuff's not working. We have to give you the boot. And then maybe whomever's coming in, it's like, okay, you know what? Just wipe the slate clean and we'll try it anew. Still doing a lot of that split zone motion, using the H-back to kick out a backside D end. And, when you have a guy like Kasari who is up there with, like it's, when you watch like Keon Edwards run zone and just the patience and then the ability to burst through, it's obviously really impressive. But, what really stood out, and I'm trying to pull up his name, but was that, at that H-back position, which again, if you know about, the way that, that run game has been operating, which looks a lot like the way that Western runs their run game, again, hey, shout out to you, Coach Marshall, last year we were seeing either all OUA or all Canadian. I can't remember. Nicholas
Second
Henning.
team all Canadian.
There you go. Second team all Canadian. Nicholas Henning, who's still on the roster at H-back for them. It wasn't 71. It was 37. James Preston at that H-back position. And hey, maybe he just won the position from him. Who knows? Maybe Henning was dealing with an injury. I don't know what was going on. But again, just knowing a bit of how that style of offense, which again, is, not because I know Nez, but because again, they're running that offense seemingly similar to how they did last year. That stood out a little bit to me. Only other thing I'll just throw out as well, if you want to pick up on about the offense, was in the first half, seeing them go with that no huddle look for a lot. And then the second half seemingly go to a more conventional huddle offense as well. But those were some of the things as well. I totally love the points you brought up about the receiving core, Cuomo and those guys. But that was one thing that really stood out because obviously, yeah, second team all Canadian as your H-back, which is the guy that unlocks that type of a run game.
Yeah, and it shows on the defensive stats that Nicholas Henning had a tackle. I believe it was a special teams tackle. So he's dressed, he's there. It's just James Preston is the one who's starting there, which is really, really, really interesting. I'm really glad you brought that up. And the other thing I'm really glad you brought up is the fact that they go no huddle. Now, it's interesting, and I think especially when you look at the Windsor D-line, because there's no Mufta Ageli, they're rotating guys in. I believe it's 96 Jacob Spencer, 98 Ozioma Iguadu. My apologies if I butchered that. And Jack Van Giel, I believe, are the three guys who are kind of rotating at the defensive tackle spot. So to go no huddle eliminates that rotation for sure. But the benefits of a no huddle offense only start when you really start rolling. And they really weren't ever able to get that rolling as much. So it wasn't as effective. However, I like the mindset and I like why they were going about it. That Windsor defense, like we've been talking about, was just so solid throughout the entire game. I was really happy to see what we saw from them. And I think it's about time we start talking about Windsor in general because they were the ones who won this game.
You're absolutely right. I was going to bring up another Queens thing. I'm like, you know what? It can totally wait because, we know what Windsor can do running the ball, and they had that, four-headed, depending on how you want to break it up in terms of how you consider, Liam Talbot, what position you consider him at. But I think we need to start with Danny Skelton because this is a guy who, who as you highlighted, through the first half, seemingly, of last year, he's occupying that third spot of top QBs in the league, falls off to the point of come the playoffs, he's getting replaced in the quarterfinal against Carleton, and then it's Nick Domofsky going head to head with Taylor Elgersma in the semifinal game. They go back to Skelton in this one. He goes 14 for 25, a respectable 147, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Of course, Tom, you obviously know who the interception was too, but for anyone who didn't watch the game, take a guess at who got a pick for the Queens Golden Gales. It was Ashton Miller Melanson. Yeah, no duh. Death taxes and all that good stuff. But as well, what I loved so much, and we'll talk about all the great things he did in the running game and those receivers, as you highlight, he's getting the ball out to, but it was the way he was using his feet. He picks up 36 yards, a touchdown on 8 carries running the ball. And when he chose to escape the pocket or leave the pocket, whatever it was, there was a certain confidence in the decision that he made that, beyond just the effectiveness of his, when he chose to run, a long of 16, again, we say the touchdown, there was something about, again, the confidence and just him being like, first read, second read, maybe to the third read. Okay, you know what? There's a lane. I'm gone. That again, for a young man who lost his spot in such a pivotal time to a hometown kid, no less. I really want to give Danny Skelton some flowers on this performance.
I love that you brought that up because he's definitely somebody that I wanted to talk to. And once again, it's so important to watch these games rather than just kind of looking at the stats here, because when you look at the stats exactly like you detailed, there's nothing really that wows you about this, certainly, 14 for 25, 147 yards, whatever. But it's still, to me, felt like Danny just exercising some demons that he had from last year. We mentioned in the preview pods that Danny really hit a wall when he started playing against Queens and then in the back half of the season. And to have such a solid showcasing, nothing out of the ordinary, it's spectacular by any means, but just to be a solid quarterback, making good decisions for the most part, I really feel like he was exercising some demons and showcasing, hey, number 7 is the one who's going to be leading this damn offense, and I'm going to take us as far as we're going to go here. So it was awesome to see that. Once again, the run game as well, anchored by Joey Zone, Wegby Mambo, and Christopher John. They're always going to do their thing. The thing that I really liked about this offense as well, and we saw it a little bit, but is starting to get Joey Zorn out of the backfield and into some of these passing plays as well. He finishes with 3 catches for 24 yards. But when you take somebody like Zorn, who is so good at breaking tackles or at the bare minimum running dudes over, and you get him out in space, even in the flats or a quick slant or something along those lines, it just makes your offense so much more dynamic. And then you start looking around, you go like, Joey Zorn's lining up at slot and Christopher John's in the backfield. Wegby Mumbo's playing H. Oh my God, this is terrifying. So there's a real possibility to have all 3 of those dudes on the field at the same time being really prominent in their roles. And I love the fact that they're starting to really utilize this a little bit more. You talked about it a little bit as well. Liam Talbot doesn't really have the biggest showcase on offense, at least, but I just think that this dude is going to have such a huge year. He's so damn versatile for this Windsor offense. I really think that he's going to do some really great things for them as well. But most importantly, I already mentioned it, Danny Skelton, exercise some demons. You're QB1, my dude. Play with that gold swagger.
Insert the Ace Ventura voice. He has exorcised the demons. But I will say though, but I'm still gonna say the point you make about how it was, especially when they went against Queens, that things started to they get a little shaky. Where I'm still gonna say, you don't rest on the laurels of this game, because of course we saw roughly 4 or 5 weeks of really good football from Danny Skelton as well, and the whole league is now seeing the potential of this team and what they can do. And fast forwarding to Laurier and some of the people we talked about there, where Laurier is fully aware that they're getting everyone's best game now. Windsor certainly knows that now. There's no secrets. Like it's a great place to be in, but of course, heavy is the head that wears the crown. And if you're going to be the quarterback of a team with one of the best defenses and one of the best run games, I mean, as a whole, they pick up what is it on the ground, 186, which is solid against a Queens D line that trotted out the guys we mentioned. Silas Hubert, obviously there. They have Darian Newell in the middle, Van Wishart, and then Eric Johnston as well, as sort of that one tech nose on that D line. So 186, you definitely take it against that defense. So heck of a start for this Windsor team. For Queens, I mean, as sort of last thoughts, I guess, before we move on to our next game that we have, this is a Queens team that is now returning home to take on a McMaster team that we're about to talk about in two shakes of a lamb's tail. And I still believe in the talent Alex Vreeken has. And obviously, when you can just hand the ball off to Kasari 21 times and get nearly 200 yards on the ground, you're in a good position, especially with that defense. I believe in the talent. And obviously, it's his first game back off of injury against one of the best defenses. Like, let's obviously, we're saying that. But that MAC team we're about to talk about is no joke. This is a tough situation. We knew this was a tough schedule for Queens, a super tough schedule for Queens to begin with. We're now starting to sort of see the fruit of that bear out now.
Yeah, and we saw this as something of a what we saw last year as well. That run game and that defense for Queens is always going to be really solid, especially when you have Coach Beckmanis at the helm and Jared Kasari. But to really be elite, that passing game has got to come up and has got to really show up like we know they can. We've seen Alex Vreeken, albeit in his first year, but we've seen greatness out of him, or at least flashes of it. I like the play that we saw out of these receivers here. They have the capabilities to be there, but if you really want to be able to get to where you want to go, where you're beating the Windsors, the Lauriers, the Westerns of the world, you got to have that pass game to go along with it. So this is not going to be just an easy road against a McMaster team that, like you said, we're about to talk about here. So Alex Vreeken in this passing game has got to be better if they want to get to where they want to go.
As we mentioned, Queens going home to open up their home season against MAC. Windsor hitting the road to head to the other side of the province to take on the Carleton Ravens on August 31st. Both those games, that is. Let's head over to those McMaster Marauders, the second game that you and I saw live from Ron Joyce Stadium, but it was the Road Hawks, the Golden Hawks, that is taking out McMaster. Final score in this game, Laurier 31, McMaster 14. Tom, despite the loss, you and I are gonna eat a little crow, I guess, off the jump. For one, I mean, first and foremost, in our preview of this game, I completely overlooked the fact that, much like pretty much every other game Mac had, despite the final score when they played Laurier last year, I completely overlooked the fact that they were in that one tooth and nail with them through the first half and then some in that game. And this one looked no different from that standpoint. And not only from that, but we have been as harsh as we've been on any individual, group, team, anything in this league. Perhaps the only thing I've been more harsh about is Ryan Sheehan as a head coach at Guelph. Second being the offensive line play and run game for McMaster and against a really solid defense for Laurier, which albeit will, missing some key pieces that have moved on. Um, I think that's where we want to start with. And I think you have some names written on a sheet of paper in front of you, correct?
I do, and I've got the biggest smile on my face because that was one of the things that I loved the most out of this team. I love the play calling from Chris Hopkins for sure, and we'll dive into that a little bit more. But if we're going to say, hey, you know what, we're going to be able to call out people if they have some bad games or some bad years, and certainly this group did, we're also going to call them out when they have a damn good game. And I'm so excited to call out the McMaster offensive line. Michael Martin, Cedric Briere, Taylor Burns, Frank Vrodenhel,
Nailed it.
apologies, Quinn Cassidy, and Christian Cote. They had a bit of a tight end set in there as well. Those dudes played fantastic. There was a lot of pressure in Keegan's face for sure, but a lot of that was coming from +1 pressure or from outside. For the most part, that interior in particular was frickin' solid, and I can't tell you how damn happy I was to see that group finally performing how they should. Obviously, there's a ton more work to be done here. There's a lot of things to clean up, but the building blocks are there against a very good Laurier defense. I was so damn happy to see these guys perform, and I wanted to make sure we called them out particularly so that they got their flowers.
1,000%. And let's just keep rolling with McMaster then, since that's where we're at, because if there was times last year, and you said at times Keegan under some pressure for sure, and it's a stellar defense, stellar guy calling up that defense. But there was times last year where it looked like they were starting to move the pocket, have Keegan on the run, and it was great getting to just shake his hand after the game and really just soak in how big a dude he is.
Mhm.
You can see the athleticism, you see the easy arm strength, where just so statuesque can just throw it the length of the field. But when we saw last year the way they'd move the pocket, it was hard not to think, oh, gosh, is this a product of that offensive lines having trouble? So you know what? Get Keegan on the run, get him moving that pocket, try to change things up a little bit. We saw that O-line, as you mentioning, play so much better, as validated by that run game. Braden Kelly picking up 101 yards on the ground. Can't remember. I'm curious when the last time they got a single rusher over 100 yards. Maybe it wasn't even that long ago. Maybe this is me just being a you know what hole towards Mac. Really showing my Guelph colors, I guess, in that regard. But they're still using that. Having Keegan move out of the pocket, and so it's just like, you know what? It almost sheds more light on what we saw last year, being like, maybe that wasn't them being like, this is us solving a problem. It's just, hey, this is just how we're going to call up the offense. Keegan's athletic. He can throw it on the run. Why not have it in there? So in many ways, it almost, kind of changing narratives, seeing new information or more information to kind of think about what we saw last year. But yeah, it was a stellar performance, and Keegan finishes 20 for 28, 254 touchdown and interception, throwing some amazing balls in some tight windows to a few receivers. And maybe this is where we go from it, that we weren't necessarily expecting to be taking on the bulk of those receptions.
I have been calling out Keegan Hall for the past couple of years, and certainly the product on the field has not always matched the things that I've had to say. I think, especially because you and I are in person and we're not only watching who he's throwing to and how he's throwing, but the mechanics of how he's throwing, how freaking good he looked moving on the run and throwing the ball in those 88 kind of pass pros. Oh my goodness. You and I are looking around going like, this is fantastic. There was one time where he completely spun out of a free blitzer, got out and was still able to get the ball out. Like, I'm so high on this kid. I really truly believe that he's the top 3 quarterbacks in the OUA. And I think that he's finally starting to really get a chance to showcase this with a stellar offensive line play in front of him. Now, obviously, I'm a homer. I'm going to be high on my Marauders, even in a loss here, because I really saw some really great things. But yeah, how could you not be excited when you see the offensive line play and the quarterback play, but when you see the top receiver is a first year player out of the Bishop Tonus Titans. Shout out Hamilton High School football once again. And Jackson Taylor, 8 catches for 100 yards in your first ever game against one of the top defenses from last year, at least in the Laurier Golden Hawks. That's nothing to sneeze at. You should be very proud, young man, for all the things that you are doing. But my goodness, that was incredible. And you think about guys like Jackson Cooling, who is such an outstanding playmaker, and to have a first-year player come out like this, that means so many good things for this Marauder offense. I'm really, really excited about the direction that we saw them go in.
And all those other elements that we talked about kept them in games last year, creating that frustration and arguably at times, perhaps even tension within a locker room. All those things are still there where you have Michael Horvat punting the ball 8 times for 379 yards.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
2 field goals and an extra point. Seeing a new name in the mix in Johan Shimbalanga with an interception in that defense there. But, just it's still like that defense with Mitch Price in the middle and then Drake Bodie and Carter Blad. We talk about some of those hard hitters that we saw in Windsor and Queens. A couple guys where, it's a MAC team where you talk about Coach Brady there, and he could be he could be a mean SOB like in terms of the way he's gonna do his thing, and he calls it up, and he has all the priors to deserve that and to be able to do it. And the seemingly is a team that kind of just embodies that, like we're a bunch of sons of what, and then of course with our guy Josh Cumber still in the back end there at field corner. Again, all those things that made this team so frustrating for alumni like you last year, where there's legitimate great things top in the OUA things that this team is doing, and then not having that offense match it last year at times. Really, really exciting time. Like you compare being at 2 home openers consecutively, you and I, both in losses, both in tight games, and we're leaving this one with, we haven't even talked about Laurier for a second yet, and we certainly will, and they deserve all the credit in the world. They had some really, really great things, but it's amazing the difference between one year when the result looks similar. In fact, it's a bigger gap than it was against Windsor, yet we're singing a whole different tune.
We talk about guys, especially on the defense, like your Drake Bodies and Carter Blad, who really had an awesome game as well. But to see guys like Demetrius Masuka or Johan Shimbala, like you mentioned there, that's outstanding to see these young guys really be able to come in and step in against a very good Laurier offense like we saw. The other thing I wanted to call out is how hard that MAC defense was flying around and how hard they were hitting. We know that Laurier is full of some tough SOBs, and they were still getting the wind knocked out of them at times, getting hit real hard and having to just go out just for a single play because, like we said, they are tough as hell. But to acknowledge that and to see that really means something to me. And in my opinion, I love when both of these teams are operating well, McMaster and Laurier playing it together, because they both have that kind of grit to them, that like, we're going to grind it out. We're going to do whatever it takes to win. You're going to punch us in the mouth. We're going to come right back and slug you with another haymaker. And we're just going to keep going until somebody rings a bell. It was an awesome match to see. Really, it really was. But Laurier, they were looking pretty damn good as well.
They kind of did. I mean, you made the transition there. I was going to say, I don't think anyone else was taking those hits as much as I think officially now our guy, Laomi Ojatalayo. I know you listen to this, maybe even watching. Shout out to you, young man. 6 catches, 58 yards. And I might have been Blad. Someone gave him a good lick coming over the middle. But let's talk about this offense. And I think, obviously, Ray and Thorne still doing his thing. Ethan Jordan, Jace Atkinson, and Jackson Stebbins. Again, like that is a 5-deep receiving core that when you have arguably the best quarterback in the nation, who again, like just putting balls into windows where, it wasn't until like we're watching Western the next day and we're like, does anyone else throw a ball like that? We're like, you know what, Evan Hill, I kind of throw some nice balls too. But like, what that opens up for a coordinator like Todd Galloway. But I think the number one thing that stood out to us was not seeing Quentin Scott back, and it came to our attention that, yeah, is it what's worse when you hear it's an injury thing or when it's like an ineligibility thing?
Mhm.
Student athletes, guys, come on now. But Tanner Nelms really picked up. I don't even want to call it pick up the slack because we know he's a beast. Carries the ball 21 times for 139 yards and a touchdown. And I think the big thing I'll leave it on this is that what we loved about that run game with Scott was that Nelms, and validated by meeting who I don't think we confirmed, but I think we're his parents and just saying like, yeah, we taught him from a young age. You just you pump those legs and you get those extra yards. And then Scott was a little bit more of that East-West guy to see a young man that this team poached from the Windsor Essex region in Tayshawn Jackson,
Mhm.
show some explosive moments to be able to say, oh, okay, maybe that's gonna be that other element we have in our run game. All these things and a bag of chips with Taylor Algersma handing the ball off and throwing the rock himself and carrying it a few times too. What'd you make of this Laurier offense?
For as good as McMaster really was and how they showcased, this Laurier team obviously was better. Going into the half, this is a very close game. I believe it's a tie game. If not, it's very close. Once again, I talked about it in previous with the Guelph game. Really elite teams are able to do halftime adjustments and to come out and adjust based on what they're seeing and really be able to perform. And that's exactly what this Laurier squad did. Tanner Nelms had some of the most impressive runs of the entire weekend, in my opinion, because so many times he got hit at the 2 yard mark and kept his feet going and gained 6, 7, 8 yards, carrying defenders on his back as he's going through. It was really impressive to see that. Taylor Algersma doesn't have the same typical day that we typically see from him. I mean, he finishes 16 for 24, 218 yards, no touchdowns, one pick. But some of those throws, you and I are looking at each other like, I don't know. There's maybe 3 quarterbacks in the league that could make a throw like that, where the window is that tight and the margin for error is so large, but it's on a rope every time. And once again, you can tell this offense has entirely come back like we've seen. And the benefit of that is the chemistry is off the charts. You see dudes like Raiden Thorne, Ethan Jordan, obviously they're doing their stuff. Laomi Ojatalayo, who I mentioned it to him. Maybe I just didn't get a real good look at him last year. That dude looks big. He looks
Oh my
big. He looks
God.
strong. And you can tell when he comes down with some of those catches, you're like, oh, damn. Nobody else is grabbing that. I don't care if that's contested. You're coming down with that one, son. But yeah, it was a hell of a thing to see. And once again, we saw flashes of it. They finished here with what? With 31 points. And we didn't even really see that offense perform nearly as good as it could.
Yeah. Well, so many things. I mean, for one, let's just stick with Laomi again real quick. Also on like their punt squad, just being that gunner, getting down the field and making a couple of hits on his own. You talk about the offense, 31 points, and not just we, but that team is coming off the field being like, we didn't give it our all. Last year, they scored 11 points in their first game against, a Queens defense that we love, this MAC defense, but that Queens defense from last year, I think it's fair to give them the nod. We'll obviously see what this MAC defense nets out in the long run of it all, but, worth noting as well. But, again, like Taylor as well, doesn't have the passing touchdown, 218 on the yard in the air, but he takes the ball himself for six times, 43 yards, 2 touchdowns, and such a spectacular moment where following a controversial, we'll say, grounding penalty he got, I think it's the very next play he takes off, and we're just sitting there being like, all right, who is the brave soul that's going to want to get in front of him? And I don't remember who it was on Mac, but salute to you because you got lit the you-know-what up. We were having fun texting back and forth watching the Western game. Who's the more deadly short yardage QB, Taylor Algersma or Jerome Rancourt when he comes in for Western? But I want to stick on that theme, and we'll talk about the defense, and we have to talk about that defense both with who wasn't there and how it looked like it might have affected them at times, and then also just the guys that were there that we, have come to just know, love, and just and all those things. But I can't remember if we mentioned this on one of the preview pods, or maybe this is just in conversations that you and I have been having. And I think even talking to some of the people at the MAC game, where like at the end of the day, this game was won in hand for Laurier. They might not have felt it. This Laurier team reminds me of our 2015 Yates Cup run, where that whole season, and I don't think I'm just speaking for myself on this, because I remember one of our team captains, Curtis Newton, calling with the other captains, calling a team meeting coming off the back of us, doing whatever ungodly stuff we did to York in their house, but calling a team meeting to say, like, guys, like, we gotta chill out, because we knew coming off that loss to y'all the year before, we'd been in two losses to you guys in Yates Cups, knowing that with the age of some of our guys, that, like, man, we can win it all this year. We don't have Western in the regular season. We might even be able to score like home field in the Yates, which isn't how it panned out, though we still got the win. And just that type of pressure. And I feel like I felt like I could feel that at times watching this Laurier team, with where, you pick up a great win against a good team, you're on the road. And, that's one thing that I feel like I'm going to kind of keep tabs on, is that sort of vibe check with them, because again, you and I have both been in that position. You spoke to having that experience. I think you said it was in 2012. I'll let you talk to that yourself. But that's something I'm very curious about it, where, we say with Western, you've won 3 Yates Cups in a row. In many regards, pressure's off. Like, who
Mm-hmm.
can blame you if you don't take home a 4th in a row? For Laurier, with teams like Windsor, like Queens, like Guelph, like Mac, playing some great football right now, um, man, I'm curious. I'm curious how that piece is maybe factoring in.
I think that's more of a characteristic of a Michael Falls coach team than anything else,
Mm.
where the expectation is always to be in championships. I 100% agree with you that pressure is high right now. You don't return almost the entire offense without thinking championship on your mind. This is the year. This is the year we had to get things done, whatever else. But with a Michael Falls led team, I think that the mentality is always there. When you talk to guys like a Taylor Elgersma, who we have nothing but amazing things to say about the kid, but when you talk to him, you can understand why so many people, us included, have gone up to this kid being like, "You're the best quarterback we've ever seen. Oh my God, you were the OUA MVP. You're all Canadian, blah, blah, blah." And he's still a humble dude at the end of the day. The first thing that he said to us, he dapped me up and said, "It was an ugly game. We have to be better."
Yeah.
That's the first thing that he said. It's an ugly game. We have to be better. That's all he's focused on, is just being better and winning championships. I think that mentality is exactly why he's one of my favorite players to watch. He honestly, because we're harkening back, the mentality piece at the bare minimum, he reminds me a whole lot of Kyle Quinlan. When you talk to Kyle, everybody's looking at him like, "Oh my God, you are the greatest thing to ever happen to football," and all the things that he was doing. He was incredible. Don't get me wrong, but the mentality is still ultimately, I'm a competitor. Say what you want to say about me. Say that I'm good. Say that whatever. I want to come out and I want to throw and I want to be the best player that I can possibly be each and every single game, regardless of who I'm playing against. I think that's what Taylor brings to the table. I think the offense feeds off of that. Like you mentioned, there's a questionable call. It's 2nd and 30, and Taylor takes off, hits dudes at the 10-yard line, and almost gets a first down. I think he got like 20 or 25 yards on that one play. So I think that leads into a lot of what we're saying here, and this mentality of this Laurier team is something that I'm very excited about.
Definitely. I'm kind of smiling as you say that, because Coach Galley kind of called us out of being like, if there's pressure, it's because of us. We're the ones who
Yeah.
just keep talking about him. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
hell
gonna
yeah.
blame Jack Moore a little bit, because he got us all fired up going back to 2 off seasons ago. We talked about this briefly, and I think this will be my last point, maybe about the offense, before we talk about the defense and all that stuff. It didn't escape me to think that to start the U Sports season, the reigning Vanier Cup champs take care of business at home, 45-14. That's of course the Montreal Carabins, les Bleus versus Sherbrooke, where the reigning Crichton winner in Jonathan Senecal, 18 for 26, 283 touchdowns, one interception. I mean, you talk about like, he only went 18 for 26, 283 touchdowns, and one interception, where you almost feel like, again, like, this is a team where if an OUA team, whoever it is, makes it to the Vanier Cup, they're taking on either Can West or the RSEQ. And again, this is me, and I apologize because I can just hear Gally being like, "Shut up, Mater, shut up," of being like, "Oh, you know what? Senecal did this or that, you know." But again, hey, we're just doing the sports media piece of these things. But golly, is it ever fun when we got talent like we have in this league? Shall we talk about the other side of the ball, Tom?
Last thing I want to say about the offense,
Please.
you gave me a nice little shout out when I called out the Onyeka sack. I think we have to shout out our guy, friend of the program, Coach Zach Scotto,
Heck
not only
yes.
for doing a hell of a job with that Laurier offensive line, but calling out a Bodie blitz. It's so loud that we could hear it from the stands. Sam's coming. Sam's coming. We're like, hell yeah, Scotto, coach him up. This is awesome. To see that O-line performing how they did was an awesome thing as well. But we got to shout out our guy for calling that out.
That was amazing. Sam's coming, and I bet you just Bodie's coming. Oh my god, that was so good. Defensively, we knew this was a team where we weren't going to see Brubaker back. We knew we weren't going to see Ife Anyameninum back. It doesn't look like we have Brandon Omanua in the middle. We knew we didn't have
Baker.
Brubaker. Oh shoot, I'm forgetting one more guy. We knew we were missing on the back end and the defensive secondary.
Nico McCarthy.
Nico McCarthy. And that's where, and again, at times with how effective Mac was running the ball in the first half, especially with the loss in the front end, that's where I think we were getting a little worried at times. Because again, even if Mac's offense, specifically in the run game, has stepped up, we know that there are better run games to be dealt with. And of course, have all the trust in the world in what Coach Tom, bail me out. DC at Laurier.
Ron Van Worker.
Holy cow. My goodness. It's getting into the 9 o'clock hour here, folks. I'm getting tired. Talk about me being old. Have all the faith in the world in what he's going to dial up and everything like that. But you know what? On the whole, really happy with what this defense was able to do. Great seeing our guy Harnour Dhaliwal back in the action, getting to see him after the game and everything like that. But I think a solid game. And what was so interesting, I'll leave it on this, was Ethan Gregorsic taking over for Anyameninum in that middle linebacking spot, as we kind of suspected, seeing him there in the middle. It really feels like, though, this year it's going to be that system that wins for them more than just being able to say, wow, you got one of the best pass rushers. You got one of the best middle linebackers. I mean, they might still have one of the best middle linebackers in Gregorsic. They have really great talent in the back end. Guy like Ethan Bayfield, along with the likes of Dhaliwal and Jahari Hastings, who picked up an interception in this game. But again, really solid outing for that defense.
Yeah, I loved everything that we saw from these guys. We knew that Laurier was always going to have a solid defense, even despite losing the amount of guys that she did. I mentioned this to our guy in Harnour, but I really wanted to call it out here. For a guy that transferred over and is playing in a new defense, he did not look out of place at all from what we could see. It seemed like he was right in there. Matter of fact, when we saw Laurier on the sidelines, we know that if there's one thing about this team, they can be a very emotional squad, and getting up and getting down and all this stuff. We see Harnour in his first ever calming the defense down, getting guys focused on the sidelines, talking to everybody, making sure that they got their head on straight. From day one, being able to do that in your first game as an official Golden Hawk is an awesome sign to see. We've always been really high on this guy, but to see it in a multifaceted way like that was just a really great thing to see. Obviously, Tristan Miller leading the tackling game here with 6 total tackles here. We saw a lot of good things. I like even though Chisenham and Senham didn't really show up on the stat sheet, he's a force in the middle. And I think that combination with Chisenham in front and Gorsuch in the background is really what's going to be some of the stars that we start talking about on this defense for sure. There's only so long that you can continuously get hit by Chisenham before you start breaking at some of those. So I really liked what I saw. Obviously, Jahari Hastings really kind of did his thing as well. This is a very solid Laurier defense, made some fantastic adjustments at halftime, and were really able to shut down what we thought was a much improved McMaster offense. And I like, once again, no surprise here, I really like where Laurier is going.
Yeah. And you know what? At the end of the day, you get the dub, you go into your bye week before taking on what looks like a really fierce Guelph team at home for Laurier, that is. And, I think they have so many things to build off of and be happy for the performance. For McMaster, as we said, they're hitting the road to take on the Queen's Golden Gales, a game that, we have so many games that draw interest in the upcoming week. And that one, I think, is getting a big highlighter around in my books here. Tom, shall we move on to our Sunday affair?
Last thing that I want to say,
Please.
mentioned this in the preview. I got a chance to say it at the game because I'm a Mac alum. Sue me. I loved the play calling that came from Chris Hopkins, offensive coordinator for McMaster. I thought he put his guys in positions to win very consistently. Obviously, he's a first-time OC, at least at McMaster. I'm not 100% certain on his most recent offensive coordinator possibility, but I know in his most recent roles, he's primarily been as a positional coach rather than the actual play caller. So to see him in this role, I love the tight end set to have McMaster in there and to really shore up some of the blocking there, and then to still see, a tight end set in there, maybe an additional blocker for max protection, and then you saw Keegan Hall just rip it downfield for some big gains as well, was a great thing. The only thing that I'll call out here, it's something that you and I were talking about, I think the big thing that we really noticed is one of the Achilles heels here is when Laurier really started sending pressure, especially +1 pressure or overloading a certain side so that there's more defenders than there are blockers. You notice that with a lot of those max protections, you don't have a standard in like a running back going out for a check down route as your safety net if you really start seeing blitzes. There was a lot of guys doing some things. I think that there was, post routes or some longer throws at least without really having a solid outlet pass on some of those. I expect that to change coming forward here so that you start seeing Keegan Hall be able to deal with the pressure as he's always done, but to have a solid throwback to go to Braden Kelly, Jackson Cooling, some of these guys that can really be dangerous in space. But overall, I love the direction of this team. I love the play calling from Coach Hopkins, and I'm really excited about McMaster. And obviously, Laurier is a championship contender team, like we mentioned in the preview pods. That's all I'll say.
Getting James Priestner back will certainly help out on the max side of things. I think
Most definitely.
I think you spotted him in street clothes when we were talking to folks on the field, but we can't truly confirm or deny. And as far as the things you were saying about dealing with pressure, when we get into that UofT game, I think we'll be able to highlight a beautiful example of a young OC who did just that thing. But before we get to UofT, we got to make a stop in the nation's capital where my Ottawa GGs fell to the Western Mustangs. Final score on this one, Western 38, Ottawa 11. Tom, there's so many angles to talk about in this one. We have the fact that Ottawa starts Josh Jansen at QB. We have seen Keon Edwards, as we suspected, and I guess really knew from seeing him in those photos. But I need to start by just highlighting, if you didn't watch this game, because let me see, he's probably on the score sheet somewhere here as well. Do I see his name? I don't even, yep, there's his name. One Kojo Odum.
Hell yeah.
Makes his long-awaited return to Western Mustang football after missing nearly 2 full years, more like a year and a half, maybe as 2 full seasons with a knee injury, a guy that I got to meet and really love and respect, playing corner for Western, a guy who has the talent to take it to the next level on either side of the border, suiting up for this team. And again, this is a team in Western where maybe it's solely because of Kojo that they're like, we're gonna, you know what, if the OUA finds us or anything like that, if they do for not posting rosters, it's solely because of Kojo. And I heard the commentator say his name, and we're texting furiously, being like, did you just hear what I heard? I don't see him on the roster. He is on the roster. They just don't have him listed with his number 21 as he's been wearing for as long as he's played football for Western. That is so bananas because this is a defense that, as we talked about, returns their whole linebacking core with Max Nixon, with Riley McLeod, with Lawrence Bowers Kane, and now to be able to insert Kojo Odum, with on the other side of a guy like Richard Adubafor, with arguably the best defensive player in the whole country in Jackson Finley, patrolling the middle at safety, adding a guy like Jordan Murphy. Oh my goodness. Like I'm so happy for Kojo, but that's just not fair, man. Um, like, wow. Just that's what I have to give to you, Tom. Wow. Wow. Wow.
We were looking at that Western defensive secondary with just Richard Adu before Kojo Odum and Jackson Finley. Are they arguably the best defensive secondary in the league? Like, that's unbelievable. The one thing that I will correct you on, that we did not see Lowers Bowers Kane in there. Instead, we saw number 7. I believe they had a jersey mix-up or something because he's listed on the roster as 47, but Jude Buchanan for Western,
okay. My mistake.
as
Thank you.
the other linebacker that was there. And I loved everything I saw. He was 3.5 tackles, but he was really flying all over the field here. But certainly that Western defense looked really solid. And it was really interesting to see. We kind of spoke about it briefly. Certainly when they started out, you and I looking like, is this a 30 front? Does Western have a 30 front running here? Now, obviously, maybe they thought, Polk is no longer there. Maybe that run game's going to go back a little bit. Charles Asselin, they didn't start with him. They started off with Suleiman Camara, and he looked really good. He finishes only with about 56 yards on 9 attempts, and then slowly but surely transition into Monsieur Asselin. And my goodness, this is what I think Liam Talbot has the potential of being in this kind of everything back. He started off in the backfield. He obviously finished with 7 attempts, 119 yards, a touchdown, one of them being a big 75-yard rip that led to the touchdown there. But I loved how they were utilizing him in the game plan here. Certainly going forward, I think Charles Asselin is going to be a very key staple of this Ottawa GG offense, certainly. But my goodness, does that Western defense look solid when they got their form going. Max Muehldofer almost looked a little svelte from the OUA TV cam that you and I were talking about, but I liked what I saw from that Western D-line for the most part. Still lots of things to clean up, certainly, but in the back end, that's where Western really wowed us with the things that they could do. And first and foremost, we talked about it, did Jackson Finley have the best tackle on special teams you've ever seen? That perfect dump tackle where he comes right down with them, that was phenomenal. We know how good he is, and he's certainly showcasing it.
1000%. And like, if a team is going to have the ability to say we can match you skill for skill in terms of secondaries, Ottawa's perhaps one of those teams, because it was so cool getting to actually see number 1 for the GGs, Denny Ferdinand, out there at corner. And of course, he's a lot out there with guys like Kevin Victome, Tolu Ahmed, Patrick and Eric Cumberbatch in that secondary, making them, like, again, if it's not Western, it might be this crew here. And, so again, like, we're talking about top tier defenses here, and especially in that back end. Of course, for Ottawa, so I guess just sticking with the defense, And that linebacking core on the front line, that front seven, really kind of where we were a little more concerned with some of the losses. It looked like Daniel Briere, the guy who's been in the program, was taking over at that middle linebacking position. And I mean, it's one thing when you are Max Carbonneau taking over from James Peter a year ago, to now be Daniel Briere taking over, having those two guys as your middle
Mm-hmm.
linebacker, your star middle linebacker for consecutive years is obviously a tall task. And I think he did a solid job on the game, though. Of course, Western did what Western did and ran the heck out of the ball, of course, with Keon, despite the freak out of seeing him back there, despite not thinking he was. Pleasure seeing him there. But again, let's talk about seeing Josh Jansen trot out there as a starter, where you're highlighting. No, no, you can see Miracle on the sideline. He looks healthy. No, they cut to commercial. There's a promotional GG thing with Miracle there, as the kind of star guy in there. This is the second time or the first time of two situations. We'll get to the second one being the UofT game, where really a bit of a curveball in terms of who we were expecting starting at quarterback. Obviously, we're not privy to all the machinations of what's going on in training camp. Jansen finishes 12 for 28, 92 yards, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Looked all right early on, as we kind of said, with, as you highlighted, Guelph being and Laurier doing a great job of making those adjustments to things that the opposing offense was doing to get some yardage on them in the first half. That we always turn to Western as being the club, so it's interesting seeing Jansen in there. Obviously, he showed so much good stuff last year, and I'll finish off just on the thought of being. But even more interesting when then you're in the fourth quarter, the game is very much all over, but the clock winding down, and no Ben Miracle even for any garbage time. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe you don't do that because it's like, well, what's that going to prove if he goes in during garbage time? Like, that's not a proper indication of what he can truly achieve. If you're going to compare him to Jansen, maybe we see Miracle start as the starter next week, and you see, okay, one of them got to start for a whole game, the other's getting a start for the whole game. But a very interesting turn of events in this one.
Based on everything that we saw, especially highlighted by the fact that A, Ben Miracle is in promotional material, and B, we didn't see him in garbage time, it kind of made me feel like maybe he tweaked something. Not something
Ooh,
that was bad enough to keep him completely out, but maybe he did a little something. Obviously, we know that he's had some injury problems in the past. Maybe he just did a slight tweak on something and they didn't want to risk anything. So Josh Jansen, they know is a solid quarterback. That's the choice that they go to. Kind of made me just hesitate a little bit. But regardless of who this is, to have to go up against, like you said, one of the best defensive secondaries that Western has, it's not going to be an easy task for anybody, regardless of who you are. So to finish like that, obviously not where you want to be. Anytime you don't eclipse even 100 yards in the passing game, it's
yeah.
not exactly where you really want to be. And we know that Josh Jansen has high expectations for himself and he's going to hold himself to a high standard. But once again, seeing Charles Aslan and seeing the capabilities that he has, I think this is a brief shot into what we're going to see this GG offense really go into. We obviously saw him last year really do some things, but I think they're really going to start leaning on him, especially if Josh Jansen is the guy and he's maybe had a slow start, or if Ben Miracle gets in there and he's had a couple injuries or whatever the case may be. They're going to have to rely on somebody. Now, I will say, even though Suleiman Kamara only finished with 56 yards, I really liked how he ran. I liked the fact that he was willing to put his head down, go into the teeth of a Western defense and fight for yardage. I think that he's got some really big upside potential as well. So I like this Ottawa GG run game potentially. I like what they're going to be able to do with Charles Aslan for sure. But certainly have to figure things out in the passing game, whether it's Miracle, whether it is Josh Jansen, who is your outright starter. He beat out Ben Miracle just outright in training camp, but having Ben Miracle on promotional material and not putting him in
Mm.
garbage time just made me think maybe there's something else going on here.
No, that's a great point. It almost kind of makes me think of like the Isaiah Smith situation that we were seeing in Guelph, where again, by all accounts, sound like he was ready. You're talking to people in the summer, say he's looking good and everything like that, and then all of a sudden we don't see him for a single snap. He's not undressed, everything like that. I think that's a really great observation. Um, let's go to the other side of the ball, or pardon me, let's go to the other offense on the field being the Western Mustangs. And we already highlighted, of course, this is a GG defense that was really strong. Evan Hillock still doing his thing, going to his fourth year now for Western. Finished 10 for 23, 123 yards, no touchdowns, a couple balls that looked a little shaky. Of course, he still has his guys in Seth Robertson and Mohsen Jamal. Seth finishing with 102 yards and a touchdown. A couple balls that looked a little shaky at times. And again, but I'm not going to make too much of it because it's the first game out there. You have a great defensive secondary, and this run game came alive with Keon Edwards with 14 carries for 104 yards, and Keanu Yazbek right behind him with 15 and 103. And as we said, Jerome Rancourt with a couple nice runs as the short yardage QB, and he'll just break it out wide. And I wouldn't want to be a DB trying to take him down. So on the whole, again, for a team with, it's such a weird year for Western. Simultaneously, they always have Vanier Cup aspirations. But at the same time, 3 Heats Cups in a row, like, what's the mentality in that locker room? I don't know how to read it. I mean, obviously it's always championship, like, for sure. They're not resting on their laurels. We know that for sure. But so I'm sure there are people who are dissecting that performance by Hillock tooth and nail, and it's like, hey, look, you open your season on the road at Ottawa. The run game was working like all heck. That offensive line with our dude Eric Anderson, talking about dudes looking svelte. My guy's looking amazing out there, and those other guys in there, O'Neal and Berwick, and the rest of those cats looking really solid. Like, if you're Western, you mentioned how the special teams performed. This secondary, seeing Kojo back there, and seeing Brian Garrity back for them as well, going 5 for 6 on field goals with 3 extra points, 18 yards single-handedly, outscoring Ottawa. Maybe it's because we're like nearing an hour 30 into the pod and we still have a game to talk about. And maybe it's just because it's the Western Mustangs, and, it's sometimes hard to say things, but yeah, they're really good at football. But hey, if people want to nitpick Hillock, he's got his priors to show that he's one of the best, and he's going against a good defensive secondary, and his run game was working like a charm. I have nothing but positive things to say about Western on this day.
Yeah, if you're looking at this, looking for anything to nitpick on, sure, you might be able to call out the stat line for Evan. But once again, 10 for 23, 123 yards is certainly not where we see him. But the fact that he doesn't have any interceptions, once again, he's making solid throws. He's, for the most part, making good decisions on things. When you start looking at this offense, you know that Seth Robertson is going to be a problem. You know that Keon Edwards is going to do his thing. Certainly we saw him last year, but I was blown away by Keanu Yazbek. I really, really loved how this dude was running. In previous years, it felt as though, maybe not necessarily last year, because Keon was injured at least near the tail end of some things, so kind of skewed some things. But there was certainly it's Keon Edwards and then the other stable of running backs here. This was a straight, like you mentioned, Keon gets 14 attempts. Keanu gets 15 attempts, almost a straight down the middle. And Keanu Yazbek is running just as well, if not even better than Keon Edwards at times. I really liked what I saw there. And you and I were talking about, what a loss that Edward Winati was. It seems like they've got their 2 solid running back system where either one of them, if they have a great year, could really be pushing for an OUA MVP.
Ooh,
so I loved what I saw from this kid, certainly. I think that Evan, like we've said, has the track record. He's going to get better and better every week. This is a very good Western team, and going to be another year of the Western Mustangs being at the top, looking to get knocked off, and they're not going to make it easy on anybody to do that.
They never do. And, you talk about Joey Zorn getting a few plays in the receiving game as well. Keon, we've seen, for the last couple of years when he's been healthy, them getting him in the mix. But, looking at the stat sheet as well, really nice to see Daniel Kabongo, second-year receiver who we saw really make an impact as, I believe, second-team all OUA, second team OUA All Star as a returner behind Javoni Cunningham. Um, Three receptions as well in the mix. And we talk about, of course, Savon Magne Jones no longer with them. And if he can become that consistent third receiver with Robertson and Jamal, we obviously know how lethal he is when he gets the ball in his hands with space. The way that this team can run the ball, you have these deep threats with Robertson and Jamal. It just has all the making of, we're going to see some plays, whether it's screens that are drawn up intentionally for Kabongo or just, oh my God, we forgot to account. We were so worried about Edwards and we're so worried about Yazbek and Robertson and Edwards. And now Kabongo's making 3, 4 guys miss, just like he has a kick return or a punt in his hands, dancing his way to the end zone. So, I mean, uh, hey, salute to you, Western. We talk about the adjustments for Coach Gleason coming in the second half, everything like that. I mean, this is a team that got their 10 points in the first half, a block punt leading to a field goal, a block punt scooped and scored for the touchdown, firing on all cylinders. Yeah, it's who do we proceed, Tom? I don't.
I think so. Western at this point, it's the same as every year. Pick your poison when it comes to the offense. Defense is playing really well. I liked what I saw from the D line. There's a reason we put them in the championship pod. There's a reason why they're 3-time back-to-back Yates Cup champions, going for a fourth one.
Yeah. For the Ottawa GGs, they're hitting the road to take on the York Lions in their home opener. The start of the Dexter Janke era, Sean Lull doing his thing with the York Lions. Really excited to see what that club's looking like. And for Western, they are getting their home opener where they'll be visited by the Waterloo Warriors. Speaking of the Waterloo Warriors, Tom, they played some football this weekend as well. Shall we talk about them?
Well, we absolutely should. It was arguably one of the most exciting games of the entire week.
Waterloo opens up their home season with a loss to the U of T Blues. Final score in this game, Toronto 31, Waterloo 29. Coach DA picking up the first win of his head coaching career in the OUA, back in his old digs. You mentioned Coach Sharia getting the Gatorade bath. They gave DA the treatment as well. And it was funny then, of course, Bertoya, despite an emotional loss, some calls, some of the officiating moments in the officiating, and we didn't talk about officiating in the Hamilton much in the MAC game, some moments that were looked a bit shaky there too, but where you could tell like both sides were fired up in this game. And of course, Bertoya's still going to dap up his guy at the end of the game, but kind of being like, get off me with your Gatorade soaked shirt and everything like that. U of T comes into Waterloo, picks up the win. A game that start to finish was so exciting. Obviously, we already talked about Caleb O'Donohue, redshirt freshman, getting the start for the Blues. 19 to 28, 268 in the air with 2 touchdowns. Picks up a rushing touchdown to boot, and the guys he was getting the ball to, the guys who were taking handoffs that weren't guys we were expecting. All these things that Coach Canisius was dialing up with just pinpoint precision, but just because we haven't really talked about him yet, I'm going to pivot to the Waterloo side of things, and let's talk about their offense because Nick Orr looked spectacular in this game. He goes 23 for 39, 246 yards, 2 touchdowns, a couple drop balls, including a ball in the end zone. And what impressed me so much about Orr was that we see him come to this program with Nolan Caban. Caban seemingly wins it, and they're kind of, he's putting a big production, but it's coming with the expense of throwing a lot of picks. Last year, they opened up the season with Caban on the road at Ottawa, and they switched to Orr. And then that run game's working so well for them with Anthony Miller, with Quentin Springer, with a really good O-line, all of whom are back, O-line and those running backs, or maybe it's 4 to 5 O-line. I can't remember exactly.
4 to 5.
4 to 5. Thank you, Tom. But you know what they say? Nick Orr, you're going to throw the ball 39 times. And again, as we said, completes 23 of those for almost 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions against a U of T defense that had a good game, but coming off of last year, Coach Mullen calling things up, a guy that, he's been around the block a few times in this league and then some. I want to start with Orr. Obviously, we'll come back to U of T. What O'Donohue did, give him some flowers already. Man, oh man, Nick Orr looked spectacular.
What an improvement from last year that we saw in Nick Orr. There was a few times where he had his receivers, and there was a couple of drop balls. Now, certainly he had his fair share of missing some throws as well, but we saw a big jump in the Waterloo passing game. We went into this game being like, well, neither team's probably going to be able to throw the ball because it takes a lot longer for the passing game to get going than the run game. So we're going to see Waterloo really run all over the place. Quentin Springer and Anthony Miller only combined for 50 yards. And to see Nick Orr really be able to showcase his talent through the air was a spectacular thing. You even look at the receiving, the guys who were receiving the ball here. I'm just going to list the names: Brett Timbeck, Evan Basiliga, Romel Samuel Slocum, Marcus Hogo, Tyler Tierney, Riley Webster, Nolan Caban, Elijah Pappin, all of them with receptions, at least one reception. So he's getting the ball out to anybody. Whoever's open is getting the damn ball. I'm not playing favorites here. I'm trying to win damn football games. Obviously, Brett Timbeck and Evan Basiliga getting some of the majority of the catches there, but still really, really loved what I see from this Waterloo passing game in particular.
Nolan Caban, I must have missed that one. That he was on the field playing some receiver or whatever that was. Yeah, no, great job. Great job by Orr. And again, whether it was a product of whether it was just the game plan coming in or whether it was just going with the punches and just what U of T was bringing, that Waterloo was adjusting. However you slice it, great job by Orr on this one. And again, a couple plays where, yeah, maybe he missed a guy here and there, but a few times that his guys hung him out to dry. And in a game that finishes like this, and with two teams that, yeah, we had Waterloo ahead of U of T in the tiers, but we're obviously not that CTE riddled to know that these two teams played each other super tight. Waterloo with the comeback victory at U of T last year. These two teams are in the same neighborhood. I mean, we had someone at Mac call us out and saying maybe we need to rework our tiers, which we'll give some thought to once we see York play, finally see all 11 teams play. But again, such an entertaining game across the board. But we set this up or kind of talked about this when you were looking at what Mac can perhaps do to mitigate some of the pressure when Laurier was having the successes. And again, like this, and Coach Kanichis is someone that we were able to meet on the in talking about his journey into becoming the OC at U of T. And there was a lot of elements in that run game that you could tell it's like, oh yeah, this is a guy that spent some time with Queens, coaching up those H-backs, coaching O-line, using that slice motion action, to a T, and in a situation where we're not only seeing his first outing as OC for U of T, we're seeing Kevin McNeil's first outing as DC for Waterloo, and you and I know this both extremely well. Me having played scout team on Guelph for 3 years, and you having played against McNeil's defenses at Mac, where he brings pressure. And like I was so wowed with what Kanichis was calling up, and I'll give it to you to go over the specifics for folks who either didn't see it or might not know exactly what we're alluding to really highlight how he was combating a defense, both with really strong players, in that linebacking core. There's still a Hinsberger, in that defense. So, there'll still be a frisky defense. Marcus Miller on the front end, really stepping up. I think this is maybe the year where he becomes, especially with Hergott moving on to the CFL, Miller might be a guy that we're looking at racking up tackles and TFLs all year long. But with the way McNeil is bringing some pressure at times, Kanichis was just had the tricks ready to go to get the ball in his guys' hands to make plays. Tom, let the people know just truly what an amazing game this was by first year U of T OC Tommy Kanichis.
We've been talking about how excited we've been for Coach Kanichis to really get out there and to do his thing. And he perfectly showcased why. So many of these plays, I don't want to take anything away from Caleb O'Donoghue because he really played outstanding. There's a reason why we gave him the Offensive Player of the Week this week. But you cannot deny that he was put in so many positions to be successful. How many times did we see proper passing routes that always had some kind of a check down, a crossing route, a drag route, something like that. So he had an outlet pass to get to. And oh yeah, by the way, that outlet pass is Jake Oseen or Chris Joseph, guys who are really outstanding in the things that they're able to do. Chris Joseph being somebody that I didn't have on my bingo card to really go off and do his thing, but certainly did. He finished with 6 catches, 120 yards, and 2 touchdowns for these varsity Blues. Really outstanding work, but the play calling that was set up here was outstanding. The run game for these varsity Blues. Garrett Ellis, once and again, another name that we didn't expect to be calling out here. 10 attempts, 99 yards with a long of 58, really doing his thing. Jack Nairo's 11 attempts for 45 yards. I liked a lot what we saw out of this varsity Blues offense, and I love the play calling in particular. They really did a great job combating what a Kevin McNeil defense is in where you're going to see some stuff, you're going to see some twists, you're going to see a lot of blitzes, and for the most part, they had pretty consistent answers and responses to that. Huge shout out to Coach Canisius for his game plan going into this.
1000%. And like it's not taking anything away from O'Donohue. He executed the game plan to a T. That's what you want from your quarterback. And it all, like we saw it play out. We can understand, and it'll be, when the season's done, maybe we'll get to sit down with Tommy and talk about these things. But I think we have enough football knowledge to be able to say, yeah, you could see these things take place and why they were trying to attack them. And I think when you look at the run game, what Ellis and what Nairos were doing, and we're sitting here talking before the pod, being like, wait, like Lucas Stoikos, like is he like what is he just waiting in the wings to add another weapon into this offense? I want to go back a year ago to another game that took place at Warrior Field when we saw Matt go in there and really give that run game trouble. And what was that, Tom? It was the fact that Waterloo, as a power run team, as a gap scheme run team, was having trouble accounting for extra pressure on those runs where you're taking that extra second or two to get your bodies to the point of attack and get downhill. And with that seemingly more zone scheme run game that Coach Canisius was calling up, yeah, you can have all the twists in the world, you can have these blitzes, but if your guys are coached up, and shout out to our girl Carly Manners, of course, helping out with that offensive line, where if you are just solid in your rules and recognizing, okay, covered, uncovered, this is my gap, okay, he's twisting away, but someone's got to fill in this gap, and times where whether it was Ellis or Nairos or a few times O'Donohue escaping from the pocket, where you're just seeing one of these offensive linemen getting a piece of this guy, and that's all you need to give your back a chance to find that gap and break it. And if you're bringing that pressure and you get bodies on bodies, that's where those big runs come. And so again, it was a beautiful thing. It was a when we finish, I might go rewatch that game. You get to listen to Adam McGuire call up the game as well, which is of course a boost under the lights at Waterloo. Man, we talked about going to that game, and I know I couldn't have made it out. What a game that would have been to have seen live, because yeah, start to finish, just what a performance by these two clubs. I'm not really sure where I want to go with this. It was cool seeing Kinsale Phillip actually on the defensive side of the ball. Cool seeing him returning some kicks. They still got the guy Owen Cassie doing this thing at safety for them as well. UofT, of course, that is, if you're unfamiliar with those names. Man, oh man. Talk about wanting to see Windsor and Queens do battle again. What a pleasure it was watching these two clubs, and I can't envision a situation in full honesty where we're seeing them play again this year. But just with these two young quarterbacks, two young offensive coordinators going against veteran defensive coordinators, of course, McNeil, though, being in his first year at Waterloo, Mullen for UofT, DA's return, just, the cherry on top of the ice cream sundae that was this opening weekend of OUA football.
To see Coach DA finally get his opportunity to be a head coach and to come away with his first victory ever as a head coach, especially at the University of Toronto, was just such an awesome thing. I tweeted out a little earlier, we went 4 for 5 on our collective picks here, but so happy to get that last prediction wrong because of the upside there. Obviously, you and I are big fans of Coach Bertoya, everything that is going on for Waterloo, but it is very tough not to feel so great for this varsity blues squad with everything going on. I really wanted to shout out, you mentioned Kinsale Phillip finished with 6 total tackles. Ilya Linney,
Mm-hmm.
7.5 total tackles, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss, really kind of showcasing what they're able to do out on the field. I liked this Toronto defense. We talked about how impressive it was for Norland Caban not to throw any interceptions here because of the ball hawking nature that we saw from this varsity Blues defense last year. I liked what I saw from them. I especially like Kinsale Phillip. And now that he's no longer the quarterback, like you said, he's able to return kicks. He's able to go at boundary half and to blitz at certain times and make a few tackles and showcase his athleticism. I liked what I saw from this varsity Blues offense and defense. I liked what I saw from them entirely. In the tier that we had them in, we said winning isn't everything because we wanted to see the building blocks here. This is only the first game, but I think it's pretty confident to say the building blocks are there. The young talent is there. I love the coordinators who are there. Obviously, Bob Mullen has been there for a while. He's really doing his thing. But Coach DA, being a defensive coach, is obviously going to give a boost to that defense. I really liked what I saw out of this varsity blue squad, and it's tough not to feel optimistic about them for the rest of the season.
I mean, we always say it when Toronto, either Toronto or York are playing well, it makes the whole OUA better. And what a great start it is between these two clubs. And we said we're excited to see what York has with their new leadership and with some of the pieces they have in there, some of the transfers they have coming to that program. You mentioned Ilya Linney. If memory serves, I believe U of T's all rookie team player from last year. So nice to see him continue on that trajectory. Last point I'll make, and I think I'll leave it to you to say anything else on the game before we just put a bow on this one. But again, because we didn't get the full roster breakdown for Waterloo before the game, or before we had done our preview pods, wasn't aware until actually it was Adam McGuire informed us that Diego Arenas is now actually wearing the Rouge et Or out in the RCQ for Laval. And, that, you still have some good guys like Latmore in that secondary for Waterloo. And again, we highlight guys like Marcus Miller, Justin Jeck on the front end, and of course with James Hinsberger in the middle for them. But worth noting, losing Arenas, I believe he was at safety, or him and Latmore. I can't remember exactly who was where, but that's a big loss for that defense. To have someone on the back end, especially when you then end up getting a guy like O'Donohue coming in here and slinging the ball. So worth noting. Tom, any final notes on this game before we wrap it all up for week one?
I think there's a lot of really great things on both sides, both for U of T and for Waterloo, to feel optimistic about. Certainly the ending of this game was crazy in that there's two onside kick opportunities because there was a penalty on the first one, and then there was a fumble later on that was a potential for Waterloo to scoop up. But obviously Toronto coming away with this one, an awesome showcase from both of these squads. We spoke about him a little bit, but I do want to give flowers to one James Hinsberger. I mean, 8 total tackles, including 1 tackle for loss, is nothing to sneeze at. He's obviously going to be the anchor for this Waterloo Warrior defense, but just optimistic about the varsity Blues. So happy that when you really look at the scope of things, it would be very easy to look at the entire week of games and to say, oh, Toronto Waterloo game, like that's the one that you could potentially miss. And for this one to be the most entertaining and the most exciting to watch was just such an amazing thing to see. Once again, we talk top to bottom. OUA's got the most competitive football out there. Suck it, Can West, RCQ, and AUS.
I literally said that when I said, I'm going to go play some softball. I'll watch this one later. I go see my phone. You're blowing up my text with all these updates. What a great cap to the, I wasn't sure, you mentioned getting those 2 opportunities, the onside kick, great balls by our guy, Cole Crossett. I'm not going to belabor the point because I'm sure, he's thinking about it enough on his own, but man, to lose a game by 2 points when he missed a field goal from the 20, Ah, man, I'm really not trying to pile. Don't want to pile on at all
Nope. But
on that young man.
we talked
Yeah,
about it. Evan Basiliga dropped one. Tyler Tierney dropped one.
yeah,
Nick Orr missed a couple of throws. Whenever you lose by
that's
2 points,
football. You can,
you're always going to
yeah,
hyperanalyze everything. But damn, if you don't start looking at all those being like, if we just did this one thing, maybe the game would have been different.
I know. Holy smokes, Tom. Well, oh, Waterloo hitting the road take on the Western Mustangs for Western's home opener. UofT starting their home season when they take on our Guelph Griffins from Varsity Stadium. What a week one that was, Tom, in the books. From the explosive offenses to the defenses looking like they have not skipped a beat, to some outstanding special teams play, new faces and new places. I don't know what more you could have wanted from any week of OUA football, let alone your first opening week, but you got it all and then some. Tom, final thoughts on this incredible open to the OUA season?
We knew of the big players that are out there. We know of a Taylor Elgizma, of a Keegan Hall, of an Evan Hillock, Keon Edwards, all of these guys, we know that they are going to play at the highest level. The first year players, the true freshman players that came out to play week one were outstanding. Caleb O'Donohue, Jackson Taylor, Tayshawn Jackson, all of these guys that have come out in the first week showcasing. Elijah Barnes, the Dewey stamp of approval. When you have that, it's just such an awesome indication of the health of our game, not just at the OUA or university level, but at the grassroots as well, in the high school, guys that are coming up ready to play right away at prominent programs and being able to contribute. That was one of my favorite moments of the entire week, just showcasing the young talent that is available in the OUA, ready to go. What a season we have to look forward to, my friend.
And we get to do it all over again with a beautiful slate of games coming your way on the Labor Day long weekend. And because it's still in the early droves of the season, you get a nice spaced out schedule. 3 games on the Saturday, 2 on the Sunday. I don't know right now if I'll be at any, Tom. We'll talk about those perhaps on the preview podcast that you'll be getting from us later this week, right here at the 55.